time to shift gears. This is the Man Shift Guide.
Welcome back. This is Managing Manhood. No, it's not. I keep saying that. This is the Man Shift Guide. Managing Manhood was an old idea, an old podcast that we used to do. The episodes are still up there, but that was like kind of the prototype of doing this one. And I really, really like that name. Managing Manhood was a great name. And I wanted to bring that one back, but I found out that someone had written a book with that title. And I'm like, maybe we shouldn't do that. So we had to change the name, but I still have that name stuck in my head. And speaking of books, today's guest, we have Peter, who has written a book, and very, very interesting topic. I don't want to give away too much of it because I want him to tell the story. And I would hopefully find that you would think that it is as interesting as I do. And if you're ready to go, Peter, let's just start from the beginning and talk about why you wrote the book, and we'll go from there.
Sure, Oren, thanks for having me on. And the title of my book is Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. So, you talking about your old podcast, it's got the same name as a book. If anybody else has the same name as my book, I will be stunned because, yes, the title of my book it's interesting and it's very unique. Excuse me. So the Reader's Digest version of my life is I was going to be the next Larry Bird. I played basketball in high school and college, and that did not happen. And then I got into college coaching, and I was going to be the next John Wooden or Mike Krzyzewski, and that didn't happen. And then I got into sports broadcasting, which took me out to Idaho, where I eventually met my wife, and I was going to be the next, Bob Costas and Al Michaels, and that did not happen. And so when I was the weekend sports anchor at a little ABC affiliate in Pocatello, Idaho, I met the love of my life. I call her Paige in my book, and she brought to the marriage her family's really weird, mysterious guru, a guy they all called Uncle Robert. And so I knew about this Uncle Robert character before we got married. We met at a singles Bible study, fell in love quickly. She was everything that I had wanted and prayed for. She was tall, blonde, athletic, beautiful, and a Christian. And but Uncle Robert, come to find out, 20 years later, it took a long time to kind of figure this out, was really a little narcissistic cult leader. He would have never described himself that. No one ever knowingly joins a cult. No one ever thinks they're in a cult. You only know you were in a cult. And so thankfully the Lord was able to open my eyes and ears to that fact. So I became the proverbial frog in the pot of boiling water. Again, my wife grew up where Uncle Robert was the expert on everything. So when we got married, his influence on her became an influence on me as well. And for the first 5 or let's say 10 years of our marriage, I thought we had the greatest marriage ever. I truly loved this woman. I thought I was the best husband in the world. She was the best wife. But Uncle Robert was always kind of lurking in the shadows. And during this time, we lived in Idaho and Montana. And Robert, his real name is Robert Booty, born and raised in Syria. So he's not related to any of us, even though we called him Uncle Robert. And he lived in Southern California. So my wife would just talk to him on the cell phone very often. Near the end of our marriage, the last few years, it was almost every day. And so I went along with his crazy ideas to get along with my wife and save my marriage. Because I knew he wasn't going anywhere. She adored and revered the man. Really in many ways that she did not adore and revere me. And so eventually, just kind of cutting to the chase and we can fill in some gaps. She left the marriage to draw closer to him, to her, her leader, her cult leader. Again, no one would have used that word. And so left the marriage. We had 5 kids. And then she and Robert started to teach our children that I was the devil, Satan, and a bloodline, and a sorcerer, and a sperm donor, to try and denigrate me in the eyes of the children so that the kids would then really look to Uncle Robert as their true father. And Uncle Robert's like 80. So, I'm in my 50s, and my former wife is in her 50s as well. So he's a generation older than us. And, I hit rock bottom really hard. I was a shadow of a man. I had, become afraid of my wife, afraid of Uncle Robert, afraid of offending them, afraid of losing my marriage, afraid of everything. And doubted my faith, afraid of my shadow. And it was never suicidal, but couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. And then it was really my faith in the Lord and friends and family who I finally filled them in what was going on. So my family, my brothers, my parents, sister-in-laws, aunts and uncles had no idea this was going on. They didn't know who Uncle Robert was. We lived again in Idaho and Montana. My family, the Young families, on either coast. So when I reached out to them, filled them in what was going on, they immediately supported me and showered me with love and helped me through that time. And I would have been brainwashed for about 2.5 years. Early on, I kind of thought he was nuts. I didn't want anything to do with Uncle Robert. But as I, went along to get along, I also started to, follow along and believe some of it. So I finally, caved and was brainwashed for a few years. So it took about a year to finally really realize Uncle Robert was not who he said he was. He was not the guy that was going to, save me or save my marriage. He was the problem. And so I am a much stronger man now because of it, because of having gone through this. I wish I could have learned my lessons differently. But that's just how it happened with my life. And so I share my story now as a cautionary tale that small cults are real, they exist, they're abusive. Ours, thankfully, had no physical or sexual abuse. It was all mental, emotional, and spiritual. Mm-hmm. And, I was a sports broadcaster on ESPN and CBS, traveling the country during many of these years, and no one had any idea what was going on. So they really have the ability, especially when they're small, to fly underneath the radar. So that's kind of the overview, 30,000 feet overview.
Sure. And you talk about it being small. So, how small are we talking? What was, the demographic? What was, what we're looking at as far as this cult goes?
Sure. So it would have been probably at its most half a dozen to a few more adults and then our kids.
Okay.
So again, I'm one of 5 kids. My parents are still alive. They're 91 and 89. None of the Young family was involved. It was only the Clausens. So that was my former wife's family. And she was one of 5. But 3 of those siblings rejected Robert, didn't want anything to do with him. So then Paige, her one older brother, and the cult of her parents rejected those siblings. And again, on that side of the family, the Clausens would have rejected their cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents. Everybody was shunned. You were either with Uncle Robert or you were the enemy, which is very typical in a cult. Cult leaders demand blind obedience.
Sure.
So there would have been Paige, her brother, her parents, us, our family, a few other men. So if you gathered everybody together, for a group photo, 12 to 15 people. Very small.
Yes. So you said that he was based out of California, but you guys were living in the Idaho area. Was he ever physically there, or was it always just kind of on the phone kind of?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of 90% of it was on the phone, but then we would meet up in northern Idaho, so in the Panhandle where my former in-laws lived, and still do. And we would have what we called a conference. And so the conference was when he would drive up, Robert would drive up without his wife. He's got a fairly normal American woman that he married. And he has 2 sons who married, and they never joined either. And I, to this day, don't even know if his sons truly understand everything their father taught or did. But he would drive up to northern Idaho, and we'd have these conferences there. And so he would speak for hours and hours for a weekend or 3 or 4 days. And we would sit in the living room, in a semicircle, and just listen to him talk. And it was really, really bizarre, those conferences. Can I share 1 or 2 stories of what they were like?
Yeah, for sure.
So, again, cult leaders hate questions. And I was the one that would always ask questions. And so rarely would I get a good answer. I would get, Peter, why are you so stupid that you don't understand me? Because my wife and my in-laws and my brother-in-law, they just believed everything he said. So at one of our conferences in the summer of 2016, near the end, because my wife left me in 2017. In 2016, the dominant story in America would have been the Trump-Clinton election or campaign. Everybody was talking about it. And so, all my kids are in the room when Uncle Robert launches into this story. And 3 of them are under 10 years old. So he starts talking about the African hyena, laughing hyena, and the pack and its dynamics, and how the female that has had several litters is the dominant figure in this pack. And the female hyena, after it's given birth a few times, develops this fleshy appendage that looks like a penis and is bigger than the guys. And all the male hyenas are subservient, and they figuratively, well, they lick the female's groin as a symbol of or a sign of subservience. And so then Robert, who hated Hillary Clinton, compared her to the female hyena, and if she were to dare win the presidency, she would strut around the world's stage, flashing her, pseudo male penis, and all the male leaders in, other countries would figuratively lick it. And that's the kind of stuff he talked about with our kids there. Where, like, if you came into my living room, Orrin, and started launching in on that story with my kids there, I would have been like, be quiet, stop it. But whatever was inappropriate for anybody else was never inappropriate for Robert.
So would you say that he was very charismatic, like in the way that he talked? Like there had to be something about him that really drew people into like, hey, this guy's got something going on here. Like,
yeah, if you peel back the onion, you peel back the layers, all cult leaders from my research really share a lot of the same characteristics. Now, I'm not the cult expert. I'm the expert on what I went through. Since I got out and recognized that I wasn't a cult, I've read probably a dozen books, and I find the topic fascinating. Yes, he was definitely charismatic. Like other cult leaders, he acted as a gatekeeper to God. He made all the rules, but they didn't apply to him. He did not like questions. He wanted blind obedience. And he was very knowledgeable on his subject matter. So he would read to us from the Bible. His theology was that only he knew the true gospel, and everybody else did not know the true gospel. All the pastors, all the churches, every church that you and I would go to on a given Sunday was a waste of time. In fact, he called casinos the true churches in America because he felt that anybody could go into a casino and be blessed by the Lord, regardless of their status in life, which, okay, there's some truth to that, but I see people worshiping money in a casino, not worshiping the Lord. So yeah, he was very charismatic. And again, he knew his Bible really well. But he would give each and every verse his little perverse twist or spin, so that 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we're nowhere near where the gospel really wanted us to go. We're at the gospel of Uncle Robert at this point.
you hear about these stories and you think about like, people are like, oh, how could somebody be a part of this? And I just keep wondering, like, like we have these people who are, we talk about charisma and they kind of like put a spin, and you kind of think about like why they want to do what they want to do, various motives like money or power or however it is that they want to spin it. And you just kind of wonder like, how does, I don't want to put it in such a negative light because this is your story, and I don't want to be like, how would you fall for this? Because, like people do what they're going to do, but really like how would somebody, like, don't necessarily fall for this, but what would be a reason for someone to want to follow somebody like that?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and so I'll kind of answer it in a number of ways. All cults, in my view, share two things. Number one is a leader, usually a male, but not always. And then number two, it's undue manipulative mind control. That's where they begin. Then from there, they can go in a million different directions. Some are big, some are small, some are physical abusive, some are not. But they all share the undue manipulative mind control. So no one knowingly joins a cult. No one knows they're in a cult. They think they're joining something better. They may not realize they're joining anything. So like in my case, the only reason I ever really got sucked into it is because I was trying to protect my marriage. I was trying to save my marriage. I love my wife. And I was hoping that this guy would go away, but he never did. Well, the point that I make about trying to save my marriage is what I shared in common, I believe, with other people who joined the cult is that was my vulnerability. Cult leaders attack or, let's say, go after people who are vulnerable. Let's say they are alone, they have self-doubt, whatever it is. My vulnerability was I was trying to protect my marriage. So they go after people who are very vulnerable or lonely, alone. And so one of the lessons of my story is that if you are cut off, if you are alone, you are very vulnerable. So in the Christian faith, we talk about the body of Christ. Okay, if I cut off my thumb, I'm not going to die. My thumb will die. I won't die. Well, that's what I was like with my wife and my kids. We left church after church and basically stopped going to church because only Uncle Robert knew the true gospel. So we would just talk to him on the phone. Well, in so doing, we were like the thumb that got cut off. So we had no one else in my life like you, Orrin. You and I sitting over a cup of coffee, and you'd be like, Peter, what did this guy say? Like, why are you listening to him? Like, I did not have those people in my life anymore. I had allowed myself to get cut off.
Sure. And you talk about there wasn't like any like physical or sexual abuse, and it was kind of more like a mental abuse thing. And so, like, what was that experience then? Because you talk about just like you doing your normal work life and stuff, and yeah, you go to like a couple of these conferences and stuff. So, like, what was really like the key indicator of like, okay, this is not cool. I should leave this, but you know, you love your wife, and like, yeah, why?
Well, my cycle is interesting, I think, and I don't know if other people in cults went through something similar, but I early on would have thought he was really kind of nuts and didn't want anything to do with him. And I, one time early on, I think we had 5 kids, so I think we had 2 at the time. And he had said some stuff about 9/11 was all the Jews, and Truman was a Jew, and Roosevelt was a Jew, and he really hated Jews. And I remember thinking, honey, I think this guy is really kind of dangerous and dark. I don't think we should have anything to do with him. And that was right around 2001. And I never pressed it. She listened politely, and it was at one of our conferences where I'm listening to the guy, and I'm like, wow, this guy's off his rocker. And I never pushed it or pursued it like I should have. Now, looking back, she might have left me. We might not have had 5 kids. I don't know. But so early on, I really had my guard up. And then slowly over the years, I really kind of got sucked in and brainwashed. So I didn't really leave Orrin. I, in essence, was kind of kicked out. So when she left me to draw closer to him, I was fully brainwashed, an absolute, shadow of a man, devastated on losing my family, losing my wife. So my journey is kind of different in that way in regards to when I noticed. When I finally realized, wow, this is wrong, she had already left me. She took the 3 youngest kids with her to Idaho. I was still living in Montana. And I, now don't have much contact with Robert or anybody. It wasn't until that point that I really realized how awful this is. And that's why my phrase is, you never know you are in a cult. You only know you were. Sure. Because if the mind control is doing its job, which if you're in a cult, you're under undue mind control, you don't know it's something awful.
I'm smiling a little bit because I hear some meowing in the background.
Sorry,
so I'm wondering.
I hear it too. And that means my mic is really good. My window is right there, and we have 3 cats, and one apparently wants to get in.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm just, not to make light of what you just said, but a little distracted by the cats. So going back to that, I kind of want to start to kind of go back. And we throw the word cult around. Mm-hmm. And you said you've done a lot of like studying and things of that, read a lot of books. And I think I want to like just kind of like define, like, in your opinion, what a cult is, because like a lot of people will throw that word. Yep. And I think some people will misuse it, and some people would use it the right way, and people will like, no, I'm not part of a cult, things of that way. But like, what do you think are like the key indicators of like, yes, this is a cult?
Yeah, great question. And I will answer this way, and in so doing, it's almost like what is not a cult. I believe there's a difference between a cult and dysfunctional, unhealthy culture. So we see a lot of unhealthy culture. So, and that could be in a family, in a marriage, in a church, in our political parties, at a university, at a business, etc.
Sure.
And then a cult would be, I believe, much worse, where you have a leader. So again, in my study, like I would say, some people call religions, cults, and I would call them, because I'm a Christian, I would call them a false religion, because I don't think a cult would have a hierarchy. You have a leader. And a cult leader will never have like an assistant or an apprentice or someone's going to take over, because to them, no one could ever match what they do. So they would not have any kind of a leadership structure. So a cult is, it's got one person at the top, and the mind control is undue mind control. Okay, like some people might say, well, this coach, he's very domineering. He's a cult. No, he's not. A coach might have some unhealthy characteristics, but you would think most coaches or a pastor, whatever it is trying to get the most out of people. It's voluntary. If you disagree with me, you can leave. That kind of thing. You don't see that in a cult. Cults are much more controlling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense because, kind of peel back the onion a little bit. On my own personal life, I'm part of a religion and, like very high topic. Like people will call other people from other religions would call your religion a cult and like, no, you're a cult and this is a cult and cult this, cult that, cult this. So like you hear that word a lot, but I just feel like that some people just like either don't have like a good understanding of what it means or like they're just like trying to mold it into their own personal narrative of like what a cult means, and it's just like it's good to kind of have some kind of definitions on that kind of stuff.
And I don't know if there is truly an agreed upon one definition. Let me say it this way. I read a book called Uncultured by Daniela Young, no relation. She grew up in a really bad cult. Everybody would agree this was a cult. And as an adult, young adult in her 20s, she was able to escape. She came back to America. I think she was either in Mexico or South America. This had sexual abuse in this cult. And so she's recovering, and then with, kind of something else to do with her life, she joins the army. Okay, so like a week or two into basic training, she's getting screamed at, she's running with this backpack. She thinks to herself, did I just join another cult? And through the story of her book, she comes to the conclusion, which I agree with her, no, she didn't join another cult. The army at times has a really dysfunctional, unhealthy culture. And I also say this, somebody sent me a book by Dr. Stephen Hassett. He's kind of one of the cult experts in America. He used to be part of the Moonies. He's written a couple books.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, okay. So somebody sent me his book, Combating Undue Cult Mind Control. And it was anonymous. Somebody sent it to me. And I remember thinking, oh, come on, it was bad because I'm still in my recovery at this point. But it wasn't a cult. I mean, Uncle Robert was, did some bad stuff, but it wasn't a cult. So I bring this up to say that I wasn't looking to have this really great story. And look at me, I was in a cult. My trauma is worse than your trauma. I wasn't looking for that. Then I finally, after letting the book, sit on my bookshelf for months, I picked it up and read it, and I'm highlighting half the book. I'm like, oh, that happened, oh, that happened, oh, that happened. Uncle Robert did that, and that. And if my experience, wasn't a cult, then I don't think cults exist. So I, was not looking for a label for what I went through, but it was obvious it was a cult.
Sure. So let's move a little bit forward. You talk about your recovery, and we kind of talk about your time in it, and like you wanted to keep your family together. And you mentioned earlier about talking to your family and kind of like how your family helped you to get out of the situation. Yeah, so that's kind of what happened?
Yeah, so again, they knew about Uncle Robert because he spoke at our wedding. He didn't marry us, but he did speak. And so, he's really odd when he speaks. Again, like I'm 6'5", typical Northern European looks. My wife was blonde hair, blue eyes, again, Northern European. Robert was born and raised in Syria. So he's a short guy, olive complexion, jet black hair, bald, portly. He didn't look like any of us. And he's a very odd character. So again, my family would have remembered the guy. They had no idea. What do you mean casinos are the true churches in America? And I kept this secret from my family for over a dozen years. They had no idea all this was going on. So when Paige left me, it was January 2017. Again, I was devastated. And she told me, don't tell anybody until, I can talk to the kids and let them know, and we'll do this together, which did not happen. So I, did whatever she told me to do because I was, at that point, so emasculated. And it was probably 4 months later by the time I finally started calling my brothers and my parents and told them what was going on. They had no idea. And they instantly saw the danger in all this and saw how bad it was. Because I'm still like, well, no, I'm wrong. Paige is right. Uncle Robert's brilliant. And they saw immediately that I was brainwashed. And you can't tell somebody, hey, Peter, you're brainwashed. It just doesn't work that way. So they were very patient with me as I came out of it. And the Lord really opened my eyes and ears to the truth.
So you talk about the Lord kind of opening your eyes to the truth of that. So was that always kind of like a thing for you, being religious before and after, like you grew up kind of like in a religious household and things of that nature?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up because I did. So my parents are still alive, 91 and 89. They've been married almost 70 years. Great Christian marriage. I grew up in a Christian home. We went to church. I went to the Christian summer camps, which doesn't make you a Christian, but I believed, I repented, I became a Christian, I was baptized, all of that, publicly professed my faith. Yes, I believe in Jesus. Before I met Paige and, of course, Uncle Robert. But Uncle Robert, felt like he was a gatekeeper to God. So again, in the Christian faith, salvation is a gift. You can't earn it. There's no steps that you have to do to prove it to somebody, a priest or a guru. It's a gift. And but all of the adults in our little cult had their faith and their testimony, how you became a Christian, doubted by Robert. And I believe this was on purpose, so that way you could only really be saved if you went through him first. So the first person to go through that was Paige, my future wife. Thus the title of my book, Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. It's based on a dream I believe the Lord gave Paige before she met me. And it's stunning and fascinating. You should really read the book. But he was able to convince her she wasn't saved. So then she kind of, in a way, was saved by him. And then her father went through that, and then her mother, so my in-laws, and then 15 years later, me. So in essence, it's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Well, in our little cult, if you're saved, but, Uncle Robert wasn't there to hear it and approve of it, are you really saved? So in that regard, he became a gatekeeper. And again, that is a very common trait of cult leaders.
Sure. So you continued your faith, and it was kind of your faith that helped pull you out of it.
Yes.
Would you say that you also kind of had like support from like other pastors or other leaders of the church that kind of helped clarify some things for you?
Yes. So, I live in just outside of Bozeman, Montana, in a little community called Church Hill. So it's a wonderful Dutch community. We moved here from Idaho so our kids could go to the private Christian school. Such a great community. And we were living here, but we weren't going to church because, again, we went to the churches once or twice. The pastors just did not know what Uncle Robert did, so we stopped going. So the people all knew us, but they had no idea the intricacies and the inner workings of the cult. So when I wrote my book and published it, everybody knew. And again, they've been incredibly supportive. So all that to say is I had other people in my life, but I had kind of pushed them away, would not really share what was going on. So now I do. So like, for instance, I go to a local church. I'm not a member. The only reason I'm not a member is because I don't agree with everything on their, doctrinal statement that you have to say you agree to, and then you become a member. And I don't.
Sure.
And that's okay. And the pastor knows it, and we have really good talks about it. And so then I have other men at a different church I talk to. And I say this because I think it's good. It's okay if we have differences that aren't fundamental to the Christian faith, but off to the side, like tangential, like infant baptism. Is Genesis a literal 6 days? Is it a figurative? Stuff like that. And I think that's okay, and I think the Lord wants us to do that, right? Iron sharpens iron. You've probably heard of that verse. How we sharpen each other, and we can grow and mature. You know what, Ord? You're right. I was wrong. Thanks for pointing that out. And then you might say, Peter, you were right, and I was wrong. Thanks for pointing that out. There's a difference when you have that in a very healthy atmosphere where everybody is humble and trying to learn. So you have iron sharpens iron. To me, in a cult, it's one guy bludgeoning everybody else. There's no iron sharpening iron. It's one guy with this, sledgehammer, and everybody else is getting bludgeoned. There's no give and take.
So I guess I want to like kind of guide this story a little bit forward. Comes like we've been part of like into the writing of the book and stuff, but I guess my last question about him per se was like what do you think was like the motivation for him to continue to do this? Like, was there like some kind of like a tithing involved, or was there some like how was he still trying to continue this after all those years? Like,
yeah, another great question. What was his motivation? What was his why? Why did Robert do this? So you brought up tithing. So yes, tithing in the Christian faith, you give 10% back to the Lord as a way of saying thank you.
right.
And so we would all tithe to him eventually. So now I would, and I didn't tithe all the time, but I tried to. And I would tithe to this church or this organization. And eventually, after maybe 10 years of marriage, all of it went to Robert. So my in-laws tithed him all the time. My brother-in-law, he tithed him. So everyone in our little cult sent him tithe money. He wasn't getting rich off of us, but we were all sending money to him.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, he loved to gamble, which, when you think about it, like, that seems a little curious there, because he called casinos his office, is what he called them. So we would send him tithe money, and he would go gamble all the time. And he was always broke, by the way, too. Whenever I would send him a tithe check from my wife and I, I'd get an email back, thank you, it came at just the right time, like they were on the financial cliff all the time. So I don't think that was the primary motivation, because again, he wasn't getting rich off of us. I really think it was more along the lines of, if you, Oren, had a bunch of people that you know who thought you were brilliant, the sun rose and set with every word out of your mouth, it takes a very strong, humble, mature person to say, no, wait a minute, that's not me. You're putting me on a pedestal where I don't belong. I'm a Christian, I'm a sinner just like you. I'm not perfect. If I was perfect, I wouldn't need a savior. I'm a guy that's got flaws just like you. You should not do this. Robert never did that. Robert loved the praise. And everything he said and did to my wife and to my in-laws was brilliant. And so he just soaked it in.
Interesting. So you wrote this book about your experience, about your I guess awakening or whatever you want to call it, your freedom. At what point in time did your book come out during this process for you?
Sure. So the book kind of details the whole journey in and out of the call, from when I met my wife, my future wife, until the divorce was final in 2020. I never wanted the divorce again. I was devastated when she left me. I truly loved the woman. I was faithful all these years.
Yeah.
So let's say she left me in 2017. The divorce took 3 years, primarily because of the children. We had 5 children. The courts got involved and sent the 3 youngest kids back to me. They saw how bad the cult influence was, and the parental alienation, where one parent tries to alienate the kids from the other. And so we had a guardian ad litem involved, and that's a person appointed by the court to look after the best interests of the kids in a high conflict divorce. And she called it the worst case of parental alienation she'd ever seen, along with my attorney and a family counselor. So, again, divorce was finalized in 2020, and even up to that point, I was trying to just delay it so maybe she would finally see and wake up, and we would not get divorced.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. So as I continued to recover, and I finally saw this, hindsight is not guaranteed to be 2020, but I believe in my case it is. During COVID, my kids are watching videos all day long. I started writing, and I just couldn't move my fingers fast enough on the keyboard, so I wrote my book in 2020. And it was very therapeutic, very cathartic, because, here you are, your life has just been destroyed. I mean, like just a building that collapses. How did this happen? Well, now you can put all the pieces together, and I can see how this happened. As long as Robert Booty had this influence over my wife, my marriage was doomed. And I can see that now. So then I sat on it for about 2-3 years because I wondered, should I publish this? And then I sent the book to about half a dozen people, friends and relatives, and they all said, yes, you really need to get this out there. So I published it in 2023.
Wow. So it kind of feels like you're, in a way, still kind of going through it. Like you talked about, like the divorce wasn't that long ago. I'm hoping that you still kind of have a little bit of contact with her, even like through the kids, or is like you guys are just like completely shut off from each other, or...
Yeah, well, you are correct in saying I'm still going through it. So, I mean, the divorce has been finalized almost 6 years. She has remarried.
Okay.
She remarried, I think, about 2 years ago to a person that was, to me, strikingly similar in many ways to Uncle Robert. And as far as I know, like I have no contact with Robert. I have no contact with my former in-laws, and I have almost none with Paige. And again, that's the name I give her in my book.
Sure.
It's not a real name.
Sure.
She is, obviously completely moved on. She despises me and hates me with a hatred that's breathtaking. It's hard to imagine. It's a odd feeling, knowing that there's somebody out there that truly hates you this much as she hates me. And so we've been battling it out in the courts for years now. Again, the courts got involved. She filed for divorce in 2017. Again, I didn't want it. We got a guardian ad litem involved. She didn't want that. She only wanted Uncle Robert to mediate the divorce. And my lawyers were like, I would not recommend that because they would have just cut me out of their lives. So again, the guardian ad litem wrote a jaw-dropping 50-page report that pointed out the cult influence, pointed out the parental alienation, which is abusive to kids, Because the kids are taught that I was a bloodline and a sperm donor. I was the devil. I was Satan. I was a sorcerer. And these young kids are believing it. I mean, that's what their mother's telling them. That's what Uncle Robert's telling them. That's what their grandparents are telling them. So the three youngest kids got sent back to me, and their mother had supervised visits for 5, 6 years. That's how bad it was. So the two youngest still live with me. The oldest three, it's kind of a mixed bag. Parenting's a marathon, not a sprint. I don't think they have anything to do with Robert anymore, but they still kind of think I'm the bad guy. Because they were taught that for many years. So it's painful, it's very difficult, but I pray for them every day and hope that as the years go on, that I will have a healthy relationship with all my kids one day. But right now I don't.
Yeah, sure. And you kind of talk about right now, what is going on in Peter's life right now? You wrote the book, it's been a couple years, it's been published. What are we doing now? Like, what's happening?
Well, I'm a single dad, and being a single dad is a full-time job, and I love it. I love being a father. But I'm also an author that's written 3 books. So in addition to my memoir, Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger, I've written 2 books on faith and basketball, with the third one coming out later this year. So it'll be a trilogy.
Cool.
The first one was called The Blue Team, and the second one was called Wardrobe of the Wolf, and the third one will be East of Ashton. And it's very loosely based on my time playing college basketball and coaching college basketball. And it weaves in Christian themes. They're novels, and I love writing. I love the storytelling. I believe that's my gift that the Lord has given me. And so in all of my writing, I try and share the gospel message, really, without again beating people over the head with it.
Sure.
So that's what I love to do. Real estate pays the bills. So I'm a real estate broker, live just west of Bozeman. But my passion is really to write and tell stories, and tell stories that really have a meaning rather than just a diversion. A lot of people read a book for a diversion. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But I try and write with a purpose.
Yeah, which makes sense, having like that journalism background. Like that's kind of, it would make sense that writing stories and telling stories and stuff would be something of your passion, which is awesome. So how can we find those books?
So you can find all of my books on Amazon, or you can find them on Barnes & Noble. You can also go to my website, which is authorpeteryoung.com. So I do a lot of podcasts. I speak publicly. And in addition to my writing, I have a monthly newsletter. It's free. You can sign up on my website. So you can learn more about me there.
Sure. And, of course, we'll put those things in the description for people who are more interested in finding your things. And really, I just I'm kind of at a loss, so much so. It's just like you've lived this whole life, and it's just like such an interesting kind of story that you're presenting. So I'm really grateful that you're even willing to come on and talk to us today. And for sure would want to get a hands on that book and read more about you. And hopefully in the future, like you have something big coming on, if you want to promote another book or something, like you're more than welcome. Be like, hey, can I come back on and let's talk and stuff like that. So
yeah, thank you. If I could kind of leave your audience with this one thought, my life and my testimony, my story is at times really bizarre and really messy. But if we all lived a perfect life, we wouldn't need a savior. We wouldn't need to be saved, right? But my story just really shows that the Lord can save any of us. I mean, my life really came down crashing really hard, and that's okay. So I share my story now as kind of like a cautionary tale. To warn others so they don't have to go through what I did. And again, it's not like I'm happy I went through it, but I have learned a lot and I'm grown from it. And I'm happy that the Lord has made me the man I am today. I'm so much stronger today. I wish I could have learned my lessons in a different way, but that's okay. I'm not... when we unplug here and turn off the recording button, I'm not going to go back in the room and start crying or anything like that. Those days are gone. I am such a stronger man now. And that's really kind of what I really want to get across to people is, we have hard things that happen. Learn from them and grow and become stronger.
One of the things that I kind of like try to teach my daughter, oftentimes we kind of give up right before something magical happens.
Yep.
So it's just like, you just gotta just push a little bit farther. And she's always like, I can't find this. She's 8. All right, so like 8-year-old problems aren't like huge problems, but they are to her. So like that's it's fine. Like she can't find something, she can't do something, or whatever, and she asks for help, and I'm just try one more time.
Yep.
Just
Good
try
for
one
you.
more time.
Yep.
And then she does it.
Yep.
And like, what did I tell you?
Yep.
So, I'm grateful. I'm sorry that you had to go through what you had to go through, but I am grateful that you're willing to speak about it and that you've healed. And, grateful for our Heavenly Father who, had a lot to do with that. And, again, thank you for being here, Peter. And we wish you well in all of your doings.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And this has been, I was going to say the right title this time, The Man Shift Guide. And hopefully, if you're still here with us, I hope that we've earned your subscription. Also, in the description, we'll have all of the things to get a hold of Peter, like his website and stuff, so you can read those books. I know for sure when I get the opportunity, I'm going to do so as well. And there is a tip jar. I'm never gonna ask somebody like, hey, give me money. But, if you feel like you want to help support, we're trying to get better at this podcast thing, and any kind of thing will help us. I want to work on the audio. I want to work on the stuff. Like, I have big dreams. I have big dreams for this thing. So, again, this has been the Man Shift Guide, and we hope that you have a good one, and we'll see you on the next one.